All right, let's take a little trip. We're going to journey down the human arm to get to know one of its most important but maybe least appreciated superstars, the radial nerve. So, to get us started, I've got a little riddle for you. What on earth could a really good Saturday night, a pair of crutches, and the watch on your wrist possibly have in common? I know, they sound totally random, right? But believe me, there is a very specific connection. And there it is. That's the answer. Every single one of those things can cause some serious trouble for the radial nerve. This nerve is kind of the unsung hero of your arm, and today we're going to follow its entire path to see what it does and what happens when it gets into a jam. So what is this thing exactly? Well, the best way to think about the radial nerve is like the main power line for the entire back of your arm. It starts way up by your shoulder, snakes its way all the way down to your hand, and it has two huge jobs. First, it powers the muscles that let you lift your wrist and fingers. Second, it gives you the sense of touch along a huge stretch of your skin. And just look at this map. This gives you a sense of just how much real estate we're talking about. All of these colored zones, the back of your arm, your forearm, the back of your hand, they're all plugged into this one nerve for feeling. So you can imagine, if that power line gets damaged, the lights go out in all of these spots. So let's start our journey at the very top. The first place our nerve can run into a roadblock is way up high, right around the shoulder and along that big upper arm bone, the humerus.
And this is where that riddle we started with begins to make perfect sense. Saturday night palsy. That's a real term. It's what happens when someone, say, falls asleep with their arm draped over the back of a chair for hours, pinching the nerve. Same thing can happen if your crutches aren't fitted right and they dig into your armpit. And of course, a more serious injury, like breaking your upper arm, can damage the nerve directly, since it runs right alongside the bone.
So let's stick with that highway analogy. If you have a total blockage on the main interstate, it doesn't just affect that one spot, right? It creates a massive traffic jam for miles and miles down the road. It's the exact same idea here. A problem this high up in the arm has consequences for the entire nerve, all the way down to the fingertips. And those consequences are a real double whammy, because the problem is so far up the chain, it affects both of the nerve's main jobs. On the motor side, you can get weakness in your triceps, but the classic sign is something called wrist drop, where you literally can't lift your wrist or straighten your fingers. And on the sensory side, you get numbness or tingling all along that big map we just saw. Okay, let's keep moving down the arm. We're coming to a really critical junction now, the elbow. And this is where our nerve story takes a very interesting turn. You see, our single main highway doesn't stay that way forever. Right around the elbow, it gets ready to split, dividing up its jobs into two brand new, more specialized routes. And you can see that fork in the road right here in this diagram. The main radial nerve comes down and then boom, it splits into two big branches. This is such a crucial spot because a problem that happens after this split is going to look completely different from a problem that happens before it. So these two new paths have very different assignments. The first one is the posterior interosseous nerve, or PIN for short. You can think of this one as the motor-only branch. It's the workhorse. The other one is the superficial radial nerve, the SRN. It's called superficial because it runs closer to the skin, and it's the sensory-only specialist. Let's follow that motor-only branch first, the PIN. Now, when this specific nerve gets squeezed down in the forearm, it can cause two very different problems that can be, honestly, a little confusing to tell apart. So where does this nerve get into trouble? Well, there are a couple of known anatomical choke points inside a forearm muscle called the supinator. One is a tight little fibrous archway called the arcata fros, and the other is right between the two sections of the muscle itself. It's really easy for the nerve to get trapped in these tight spaces. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. A person could have compression in this exact same spot, but one person might have major muscle weakness, while another person just has pain with totally normal strength. So, what gives? How do we tell what's going on? This chart lays it out perfectly. If the main problem is weakness, you can't straighten your fingers out, we call that PIN syndrome. But if the main problem is a deep, aching pain in the forearm with no weakness at all, that's called radial tunnel syndrome. The theory is that a milder, more chronic irritation causes the pain signals, while a much more severe compression actually starts to block the motor signals, causing weakness. And check this out. Notice how neither one has sensory loss? That's because we're on that motor-only branch of the nerve. The sensory branch is off doing its own thing. Okay, Let's hit rewind and go back to that fork in the road at the elbow. Now we're going to follow that second path, the sensory-only branch. The problems this nerve runs into are a lot closer to the surface, and they're often caused by things we put on our bodies every single day.
And here we are back to our riddle again. The source material is super clear on this. The condition here, which is often called Wartenberg syndrome, can be caused by pretty much anything that puts constant, low-grade pressure on the nerve right near your wrist. We're talking a tight watch, a bracelet, and yep, even handcuffs.
And this diagram shows you why. See how this superficial branch travels down and fans out over the back of the hand and thumb? It's purely for sensation. It has zero motor function. So if you compress it, you won't get weak. You'll just get that annoying numbness, tingling, or even burning pain right in that green patch. So to wrap this part up, the key features are simple. It's sensory symptoms only. There should be absolutely no motor weakness. And a classic little test is something called the Tunnell sign. If you gently tap over the nerve at the wrist, it'll often send a little jolt or zing of tingling right into the hand.
Wow, okay. We have gone all the way from the shoulder, down past the elbow, and landed at the wrist. Let's zoom out now and look at a map of our entire trip to really put all these pieces together.
This right here, this is your ultimate cheat sheet. This is the whole story in one place. If the problem's in the upper arm, you're looking at both motor and sensory loss. If the problem's in the forearm, it's all about figuring out if the main issue is weakness or just pain. And if the problem is down at the wrist, it's going to be sensory loss only. It all comes down to location, location, location. And that really brings us to our final thought. Now that you understand this nerve's whole journey, its main highway, its fork in the road, and its specialized branches, think about it. If you felt something weird in your arm, what's the very first question you should ask to start pinpointing where the trouble might be? Thanks for coming along on this little journey with me today.